There we go. Go back to sharing the screen. And hit share again. There we are. So when I share the screen, does it become like the biggest screen, or is it just as one of the other monitors?
It becomes the biggest screen.
Oh, okay, cool. So right now we're all looking at John Wayne with his hands on his hips.
Yeah, unless someone's overridden speaker view. I think that's the way you have it set up.
Cool beans. All right. Morning, Laura. Or good afternoon. There you go. There's the wave. All right. Good deal. Well, good deal. And so I've got 12:28. We'll give it just another minute or two. People are coming in here at the last minute, which is fine. Glad to have you. And going to be a great presentation. We had a good speaker last week with or not last week, but 2 weeks ago, talking about the genocide in Iran and Iraq and all that. That was crazy. Good speakers, Martha.
Thank you.
And prior to that, Fadi, he's a good egg.
What was his name?
Who's that?
The guy that spoke on the atrocities.
Trimble.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sonny Trimble. Mm-hmm. Yep, he was sharp.
Yep.
Cameron, you're looking very official today. All right. All right. Good.
Should we all unmute when the speaker begins?
You know, you want to mute when the speaker begins.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely welcome to unmute for now, for about another minute or so. Yeah, definitely. And okay. And it's funny. I have. Yeah. Perfect. There's my 212 buddy, Mr. Bennett. Good stuff.
How many members do we have on the call right now?
Right now, 2, 3,
16.
16. How about that? Okay, cool.
Who knows John Wayne's real name?
John Wayne's real name is John Wayne or Chuck Norris.
No.
What's John Wayne's real name?
Marion Michael Morrison.
I might change it to John Wayne.
And he hated horses but loved skiing, water skiing.
Okay.
Loved the water, boats, skiing, all that sort of stuff.
How about that?
Yeah.
Cool. Lowell, you're a wealth of knowledge, man.
Where did he get the name from, I wonder?
His mother and father.
No, I mean John Wayne.
Oh, if you had a name like Michael, Marion Michael Morrison, I think I find John Wayne more acceptable. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Probably some film producer.
Wonder what Chuck Norris's real name is.
Who?
All right. Well, guys, listen. Thanks for joining us on our July 27th Kiwanis Club Zoom meeting. Thank you so much for being here. We do have a special guest today, and I'm going to have Martha introduce him here in just a minute. But before we go ahead and begin the official meeting, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with our buddy John Wayne, and he's going to say our Pledge of Allegiance. So bear with us here. Hands on your hearts, guys.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yay!
Hey, how about that? All right. Let me stop.
That's good.
All right. Well, cool. Now we got that out of the way. There's no need to bless our lunches because you guys have probably already eaten or are eating and have probably already blessed your own lunch. So we can bless my coffee here. How's that? Okay. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and give the control to Martha and have you introduce our guest speaker today. Thanks, Martha.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to introduce Dr. Simon Metcalfe. He's going to talk to us today about the local economy. Simon started teaching economics at the T.A. Mary Show Community College in Grenada, West Indies in 1998. It was here that the West Indies cricket team became his second favorite national team, and he is keenly following the current test series between England and the West Indies from Old Trafford, England, about 10 miles from where he grew up. He passed on his love of cricket to his younger son, who toured India last summer and was supposed to go to Guyana this summer, but coronavirus. His talk today will provide information on other economic impacts of the virus, concentrating on the local economy. He has been providing local economic updates for over 10 years while at Augusta University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Simon Metcalfe.
Yay.
Simon, you've got control, and you should be able to share your screen and have at it.
All right. Thank you. I see some people I recognize. I didn't know Dalton Brandon was still here.
Be nice. That's right.
All right. Now I've got to find. Do you see my screen?
We do. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you for having me back here. It's been a while since I've talked to the club, and it's kind of different now that we're doing all this by Zoom. But I wanted to talk about coronavirus and the economy was the topic that Martha gave me. But I do want to update you on the England-West Indies cricket score, because I know you're all anxious to know what's happened today. As you know, the West Indies were set 399 runs to win by England, and at the close of play were 10 for 2 yesterday. Unfortunately, the picture in the bottom left-hand of our screen shows you what the day was like today in Manchester, England. It has a reputation for being a bit like Seattle. It always rains, so there's no play today. So tune in tomorrow, 6 o'clock should be the due start. The weather forecast is a bit better, but still a little bit of rain. So there has been some current research on economics and the current coronavirus. Here's one from Jared Rubin at Chapman University. He surveyed 23,482 papers written by economists. He placed them into 5 categories: economic effects of COVID, government response, epidemiology by economists, natural experiments, and my favorite, papers that should never have been written. He then surveys 327 meta-analyses of COVID papers by economists and discuss trends and commonalities. He proceeds to survey 15 meta-analysis of papers by economists, and then he conducts his own meta-analysis of these 15 meta-analysis, with the result, obviously, that more research needs to be done. So this is a short overview of really what the coronavirus has done to the economy. And rather than it being the good, the bad, and the ugly, it's more the ugly, the bad, and we'll try and find some good in what's going on. The emphasis I'll have is really on the local economy, with some US and Georgia statistics just for some context. So some of this you'll have seen, and some of the headline rates. The GDP in the US fell by 5% in the first quarter. The new figures are due out on Thursday for the second quarter. So that'll be something that a lot of people will be looking for anxiously to find out what's going on. Obviously, in the first quarter, most of the downturn occurred kind of late in March. So even though it was a severe downturn, it was really only 1 month, if that, of reduced economic activity. So the second quarter may be even worse. The Atlanta Fed right now has a figure of negative 33% for its estimate of GDP in the second quarter. So possibly some more bad news just this week coming up. If you look at GDP across different countries, here's some numbers from Europe. I'll highlight the ones from Italy, France, and Spain. Almost 20% fall in GDP in the first quarter. Obviously, those were some of the countries that were particularly hard hit by coronavirus in Europe. I also put up there Sweden. Didn't actually see negative growth. Certainly saw a slowdown in GDP. But if you've been following in the news, Sweden definitely adopted a different kind of policy response to coronavirus. They kept having schools. They didn't shut down their economy anywhere near as much as other European countries, and saw the benefit of that, at least in the economic figures. As we said, GDP figures coming out this week. A lot of the official GDP figures and other economic statistics come out with a much delay, either weeks and sometimes months delay. And so there's lots of different things out there now trying to give real-time data. So Apple does mobility trends because they track you everywhere you go with your phone. And you can see here that, again, the countries that were hard hit in Europe, France, Italy, and Spain, saw downturns in the mobility of somewhere around 80 to 90% as they had really severe and stringent lockdowns. And you can see Sweden, the light blue line at the top, their mobility data just dropped by about 10 to 20%, so much less. The US, you'll see there in the middle, the dark blue line, kind of somewhere in the middle. So there's lots of this kind of real-time data. Some of it is useful. I mean, it does kind of tell us what happened in the different countries and how, you know, stay at home, shelter in place orders, that kind of thing did affect mobility. But it's not necessarily true economic data. We don't know anything about spending that consumers have or have not been doing from this kind of data. We don't know, for example, particularly firm spending, you know, what they're doing in terms of their capital investments and firms' investments that they're doing. The other thing to realize is that this data is not seasonally adjusted. Both Apple and Google set the baseline period for the month of January. So you see 100 is in January. So now you're seeing a lot more mobility getting up beyond even January numbers, but a lot of that is due to the fact that normally in the summer, more people are traveling. So it doesn't take account of seasonal variations and things like that. But nevertheless, it's useful kind of information to look at to get a gauge of, you know, what's going on in the economy. There's some company is producing credit card and debit card data, and that's showing that that's gone through the roof. And you might think, well, that's good. People are out spending, but probably what's happening is that people are using cash less and using contactless payment methods, and so debit and credit cards are up, even though, you know, total spending may not be. So I think there's some interesting data out there, real-time data, but it's not necessarily indicative of the economy as a whole, but it's a useful supplement to some of the official data that we have. So if we go back to GDP, the numbers that we've had before, you can see that, you know, Sweden didn't shut down as much, but its deaths per 100,000 of population are kind of equivalent to some of the European countries. And the US, out of these figures at least, has the lowest deaths per 100,000 of the population, and that decrease in GDP. But if you're interested in getting away from coronavirus, let me recommend to you Barbados. Lovely island. It's actually where I got my green card to come and work here in the United States. Only 106 cases have ever been reported of coronavirus, just 7 deaths, equivalent to 2.44 deaths per 100,000 population. And the Barbados government has just announced a 1-year visa program. You're working from home for the next year. You can pay, I think it's $2,000 per person, and they'll give you a visa to go and work from Barbados. So your screensaver doesn't necessarily have to be the beach. It can be the beach. The other good news, obviously, with Barbados is the picture down at the bottom, they do play cricket. So you can always go and see some cricket at the Kensington Oval, which is pictured here, if you get bored of the beach. Some other country data, you know, China was obviously the first one that was affected by this coronavirus, and the top left-hand chart here from The Economist shows you how their GDP changed, shrinking by about 6 to 7% in the first quarter. but it bounced back. So their annualized growth rate is about 3.2%. So we can see some bouncing back. GDP figures from China, a lot of economists doubt the accuracy of some of these numbers that we're getting out. But if you look at the top right-hand chart, you'll see that other indicators of economic activity are kind of back to where they were before they had the corona virus affect them. But then the ones at the bottom, like scheduled flights, metro trips, restaurant spending, they're still somewhat way down on pre-coronavirus levels. If you want to look at GDP by state in the United States, you can see Georgia GDP first quarter fell by 4.7%. New York, obviously one of the hardest hit states, fell by 8.2%. Some of the Midwest states, some of them never even had shelter-in-place orders. Their GDP fell somewhat less than here in Georgia. Georgia's kind of middle of the road in terms of decline in GDP. Again, this Apple mobility trends shows you what's been going on in terms of driving, whether we're taking public transport or walking. You see walking and driving has recovered, but transit, and this doesn't affect us as much here in the local area in Augusta. We're not a big metro area with public transportation or subway systems or things like that. But you can obviously think that if you're worried about coronavirus, people will be taking transit a lot less than they may be walking or driving or taking other forms of transportation. So the unemployment rate in the United States, headline figure, you see this first Friday of every month. You'll be aware of these figures, I'm sure. Peaked at 14.7% in April, currently now running at about 11.1% in June. It's equivalent to about 18 million people unemployed in the United States. The next numbers will come out will be for July. They'll come out on August the 7th, I think, is the Friday. But the ones to watch out for, I think, will be the numbers for August. Right now, the unemployment insurance benefits that people are receiving from the federal government are due to expire. And so if those are not replaced, and there's, as I came to work this morning, they were still talking about the stimulus package that they may be putting together. But I think that's the July rate. The August rate will be something to look for, and that comes out in September. So these initial claims for unemployment that we've seen spiked. Something like 30 million people have at some point claimed unemployment insurance, and then it'd been declining on a weekly level until last week, when there was a small uptick that occurred, particularly because some states such as California, Texas, Florida had started to put new restrictions on businesses, and so there's an increase in people making claims. The question is whether these claims and the benefits that people are receiving is adding to the unemployment levels. There was some data that I read recently that 70% of people who are receiving benefits are receiving benefits greater than the wage they used to be earning. So there's not a lot of incentive to go back to work if you can get more money from staying at home. 20% of people received double what they used to be earning. And then some states you're supposed to report people that refuse to come to work, but I think a lot of businesses have got more pressing matters to be concerned with than reporting individual workers and things like that. So there is some suggestion that people are not going back to work. My conversations with some business owners in the local area is that they found it hard to rehire people whilst they still had these benefits. On the flip side, there's definitely less vacancies out there. Job openings are at the lowest since 2014. We lost, 8 to 2 million job vacancies declined. You do see signs around town as you're driving around town that people are hiring and vacancies and things like that. I think some of them are left over from a few months ago and they haven't been replaced. But on a national level, there certainly is a lack of vacancies. If you look at the Georgia unemployment rate, Georgia did slightly better than the national average. It peaked at 12.6% in April, and that's now down to 7.6%. And then in Augusta, our peak was even better than that, if you can call a peak of 10.9% in April better. And then that declined to 9% in May, which is in the graph that I have here. The unemployment rate came out from the Georgia Department of Labor last week, down again to 7.2%, but that's not seasonally adjusted, so we'll have to wait to see how that changes. Where does Georgia fit compared to other metro areas? You can see this graph. This is again just the May's data. You can see that Georgia, all the metro areas are yellow, saying that their US, the unemployment rate is lower than the US average. The ones that have lower unemployment than Augusta are Athens and Gainesville, Hinesville, Rome, Valdosta, and Warner Robins all have lower unemployment rates than Augusta. But you can see where some of these hotspots are around New York in the Northeast, Florida, parts of Texas, Michigan, and then the 3 states on the west seem to have been hardest hit by rising unemployment. This is a graph just of adjoining states with Georgia, South Carolina. You can see Myrtle Beach is particularly hard hit. Leisure and hospitality was an industry, and I've got some numbers on those coming up later. That was particularly hard hit by the coronavirus. But generally, Georgia's done fairly well, and Augusta's done probably better than Georgia as a whole. U.S. unemployment fell. 20 million jobs were lost from March to April. That's a 14% decrease. You can see we've been picking up in the last couple of months, but still way below where we were. Here's starting to get some numbers now through Augusta. Augusta saw 25,000 jobs lost between March and April in the local area. That's a 10% decrease in the number of jobs in the local area. We've seen again some uptick in the last couple of months. May, we gained back 7,700 jobs. June, another 4,000 jobs, but the rate of increase is slowing a little. We can break down this employment then by different sectors. Okay, leisure and hospitality, back to cricket. Okay, they actually allowed crowds back into cricket matches in England just recently, so I don't know whether college football will get there yet, but they did allow people to get back in. They had to, every other row had to be spaces between groups from particular families, but they were allowing some spectators back into sporting events. But certainly the leisure and hospitality industry has been the hardest hit. In Augusta, we lost 12,000 jobs. So almost half of the jobs lost were in the leisure and hospitality sector. That's a 44% decline. That's almost half the jobs in leisure and hospitality lost between March and April when we had the shelter-in-place order. Good news is we have had about half of them back, but about pace is of going back slowing, and obviously some restaurants and things like that will never be back to full capacity in the current environment.
Well, before you go to that next slide, Simon, I had a quick question on the cricket slide. Is that just like glorified T-ball?
No, it is not.
Sorry.
I have seen T-ball. It's a lot better than T-ball. So leisure and hospitality by state. So this is the percentage change from a year ago. In Georgia, 42%, 43% decline in leisure and hospitality jobs. Again, you can see some of the concentration up in the Northeast at 50, 60% declines. And then this is how's it changed? Sorry. This one I think was just the change over the month from April. And then this is June. So we're about 18% below what we were this time last year in leisure and hospitality. Another sector that was hard hit was education and health services. Okay, the picture at the top is Dowrich. He's the West Indian wicket keeper. He failed to make a catch and got hit in the face with a ball. So he's now on concussion leave. But health services, particularly hard hit, which is kind of strange because we've got a health emergency and less people are working in health services, but a lot of non-essential health services were curtailed during the shelter-in-place order. A lot of dentist offices, doctors' offices were closed and things like that. Here we see a 12% decline in jobs, 4,500 jobs gone, and only about a third of them gained back. So the other thing to notice about this sector, it says education and health services. Education here does not include the K through 12 school system or myself, for example, who works at AU, because those are counted as government jobs because they're paid by the local government or paid by the state government. So this sector is really largely health services, and it was particularly badly hit. Georgia itself for health services, not particularly hard hit, only a decline of about 1% throughout the state. Again, you look at New York up at 8%, Nevada almost 10% decline in those kind of jobs. Other sectors that were hard hit, retail. Okay, if you're interested in getting into cricket, there are a couple of cricket retail stores in Atlanta I can point you in the right direction for if you want to progress from T-ball to something more adult orientated.
That's right. We're getting some comments in the chat window about cricket. It looks like we're going to need some cricket lessons from
cricket lessons. Okay,
yes.
we can do that. So yeah, retail jobs. We lost 1,600 locally. That's a fall of about 6.4%. Slower to pick back up, but yeah, I think stores are beginning to work out how they can open safely, and sales are picking up. In Georgia, they actually saw an increase in retail jobs over the last year, 0.4% increase. So not particularly hard hit in the state of Georgia as a whole. Another sector that's hard hit is this, what the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls other services. It's things like religious activities, like churches and stuff like that, which were hard hit. Death and pet care, apparently, dating services, but also personal care, like haircuts, nail salons, things like that. You see the pictures at the top here. This is Sam Curran before the Corona apocalypse, and then Sam Curran afterwards, because he couldn't get a haircut. So they're all wearing headbands. But other services was a particularly hard hit sector, lost jobs, 21% fall in jobs in other services, particularly in the personal care sector. But again, gained about half of them back. And that seems to be the consistent story is, you know, we gained about half the jobs back that we did lose. Professional business services. This is a huge sector that includes a wide variety of hard to lump all together and say this is a particular industry. It's computer services, certainly, lawyers and accountants, but also marketing services. So you see here some of the people that advertise at cricket games.
You know what?
Yeah, the Sandals resorts in the Caribbean, Emirates Airlines, NatWest is a bank in England. But all these kind of services have declined. In the local area, we lost about 7-8% of these jobs. And again, coming back a little bit, the pace is maybe picking up. Financial activities, not too much of a change. If you look at the scale on the left-hand side, it's only about 250 jobs lost in financial activities. Manufacturing, again, we need someone to make these cricket bats for us. Probably not in the local area, but again, if you look at the scale on the left-hand side, it's only, what is that, 500 jobs lost in manufacturing is all it was. It looks like a steep decline just because of the scale that the, actually this is a Federal Reserve graph that I use. So manufacturing really wasn't particularly hard hit in the local areas, you know, falling less than 2% in the local area. Mining, logging, and construction. We've got to cut down these willow trees to make our cricket bats. And again, construction not too badly hit. I have some friends in the construction industry. The bigger firms, you know, they're planning out months, maybe even years ahead. And so they haven't really been affected that much by construction. That may be a lag that's coming in later down the line. But some of the smaller firms, you know, maybe working in residential areas or things like that, and people have put off, you know, home improvements or that kind of thing. Some of them are seeing a decline in the number of jobs that they're taking on, and therefore the employment that they can use. Transportation has obviously been massively hit, particularly international travel. There are several players on the West Indies team that said they weren't going to travel to England because they were worried about coronavirus. Certainly getting airfare and that kind of thing is difficult. So transportation is down. Only about 250 jobs, and we've gained some of those back since as well. So the bright areas, government employment's up, which is good for me. You know, one of my favorite quotes was from an economist who kind of quoted Jeff Foxworthy, who said, you know, if your job is in the government sector, but you believe jobs growth is going to be in the private sector, you may be an economist. And so government jobs have been up, but a lot of government is freezing hiring right now because of the state budget, local budgets and things like that. So although government employment has remained fairly steady and maybe even increased a little bit, I don't see that being true over the next year with hiring freezes and difficult to hire in the local government and state government. The other good news, if we're looking for some good news, is earnings are actually up between maybe $25 and $50 a week, which is good news if you have a job. Some of this is that some firms are having to pay higher wages to compensate for the risk. We call that compensating wage differentials in economics. So, you know, I saw like Bojangles was offering $15 an hour because, you know, it's normally it would be a minimum wage job, but, you know, just to get people back to work and maybe having to compensate them for the risks involved. But some of it is also the fact that some of those low wage workers in places like fast food restaurants are no longer working. They've dropped out of the data. And so those low earning wages have dropped out, whereas a lot of the white collar work can still be going on remotely and from home. And so they stay counted as earnings. So could be a bit of both there on earnings. Here's your Apple mobility trends for the counties in the metropolitan area. Again, you can see Richmond County saw the sharpest decline, maybe a 50% decline in mobility as we sheltered in place. But all the counties now are back up above the levels that they were in January. Just bear in mind, though, that, you know, people are still traveling for vacations right now and things like that. And so you would normally expect mobility to be increasing in the summer. And so, you know, those will probably decline again going into the fall as people go back to work home or wherever, and hopefully schools start. Here's some mobility changes that we've seen. Again, this is from the baseline in January. We're traveling less for retail and recreation. Grocery shopping is about the same. Here's the change that we're seeing right now. Parks and leisure travel is up, particularly in Georgia as a whole. Richmond County is up 14%. Transit, as I mentioned earlier, probably doesn't affect the local area as much. We don't have as much public transportation, so that's down much less than it is in the state. You can still see that traveling to workplaces is down about 33%. Still a lot of people are working from home, and residential is up by about 10%. And so one of the things that I do is I have this labor market index that some of you may have followed in emails that I send out and that we put on the whole college website. And so this is the last 12 or 13 months. You can see the big declines that have occurred in the last couple of months in the labor market index. This is a index of like unemployment, employment, labor force, earnings, things like that. Put it all in one index. Just so it's one number, and you can see that the declines have been pretty large. I've been calculating this index since 2007, and these 2 months, the last couple of months, are the two largest single month declines that we've had since 2007. And then I also run this through another computer program, and we can calculate the probability that the Augusta economy is in recession is about 93% right now. But you could probably walk outside and tell me that as well. So it doesn't take economists to know that the economy is struggling, but the Augusta economy is doing probably better than Georgia and the nation, but still very much in recession territory. So the ugly, the bad, and the good, you know, been pretty poor, particularly if you're in leisure and hospitality. Health services, retail, other services like that, personal care, those have been really ugly. All sectors have seen a decline. So, I mean, it's been bad across the board. So what's the good news? Well, England can still play cricket. They have an ability to win test matches still. So that's the bright side. We are seeing pickups in the local economy in terms of employment, but it's slow. It's probably not going to be that V-shaped recession that people are hoping for. It's going to be more like a Nike swoosh is something that I described it as a couple of months ago, or like a Sherlock Holmes kind of pipe, where it goes down steeply, a bit of recovery, but then the pace will slacken off a little. So that's the information I have, and I certainly willing to open it to questions, particularly about cricket, but also any other questions that people have.
So Simon, now's probably a good time to go ahead and try and give me back control of the meeting, and we'll go to the Q&A here. Absolutely. We did have a question in the chat that said that they were surprised, talking about healthcare being down, that it was particularly hard hit. And I think you talked a little bit about it, but why wouldn't it be the other way around, where, you know, with healthcare being, you know, our biggest problem right now, you know, this COVID thing, why is healthcare down when it should be up? And I think you kind of addressed that with dentists and some specialty docs.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of doctors' offices were closed, and they laid off their support staff and things like that. There's also some that, you know, the economy is not as dynamic as sometimes as economists think it is. So if people are laid off, and maybe they're only temporarily laid off and they're just waiting to go back, but even if they were permanently laid off, it's not always easy to pivot and go and find jobs in a hospital area or things like that. Right. Or if they were laid off temporarily, they may be restricted from taking other jobs that may have been available. So the dynamics of the economy prohibited a lot of the movement to these maybe positions that we could have utilized.
Now, and so in your opinion, how has consumer spending been affected with people having stimulus money and some of these additional benefits? Are you able to be tracking the consumer spending?
So I
Like,
to answer that question, I am not, but let me tell you this, right?
Yes.
The personal savings rate in the US normally runs at about 8 to 10%. So that's 8 to 10% of people's disposable income after taxes. They normally save on average about 8 to 10%. That shot up to over 30% in the last couple of months. Okay. So you can send as much stimulus checks as you want to people, but you can't make them spend it, right? If they're still worried about having a job, or keeping a job, they're not going to go out and spend. They're just going to put that money in the bank and save it. That tends to be what we've seen.
Certainly
So
the
the flip
brighter-
side of spending,
brighter
saving,
people
and
do that.
saving is definitely up.
Gotcha.
Simon, I have a question.
Yes, Dalton.
I'm more interested in the macro long-term trends, like what do you or other economists see as permanent changes in the economy, like spending habits? And I know we've lost businesses and some of them are never going to come back. But what's the big picture that you perceive in the long run for permanent changes?
I think there's a couple of things, and it mainly involves going online. I think there's going to be a lot more virtual employment, working from home, less working in central locations. You've seen some of the big companies, saying that people are going to be working from home. Twitter, I think Martha said Google was going to all work from home for the next year. I don't think some of those are going to come back. That's going to be a trend that people are going to see. Jeff was talking earlier as well about he's actually seeing an uptick in productivity from some of these people working from home. And so, if we do see people working from home and people being more productive, we're not going to go back. I think there's definitely been, and this has been a trend for a while in terms of spending, consumer spending. Increasingly, that's going to be online. It's just hard to find stuff when you go to the store. You can just go to Amazon and get it from Amazon. So I think those are some of the trends that are going to be more permanent because of this.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else has some questions for Dr. Metcalfe here? Any other
Did you
trends?
live in Bridgetown?
I'm sorry?
Did you live in Bridgeton?
I did not live in Bridgetown. We were living in Grenada, which is the kind of the next island over, but the American consulate was not, wouldn't do visas. So is that my fire alarm? So we went over to Barbados for a few days to get my my immigration papers organized. This was way back in the 90s.
Yeah.
So I didn't live there. I just visited Barbados.
Is that your fire alarm going off, son?
I believe that's my fire alarm, yeah. I don't know who set a fire. There's no one here but me.
All right. Well, it sounds like you might have to go.
I think I got to go, yeah.
That's right. Well, listen, thank you very much, Simon. And your safety is important, so we need you out of the building.
I appreciate it. Sorry I had to cut this short, but
No worries.
let me go check.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, guys.
Appreciate it.
Yep. And so he's gonna get out of the building there. That's fun. Listen, we've gotten some good feedback on the Zoom meetings. If there's anything we need to do differently, please email me or call me. Let me know what we can be doing differently. I did want to mention to everybody that's on or listening or is going to listen to this down the road, our comeback committee has been keeping up with all the different recommendations, what's going on with the church, letting people come back and have group meetings. We're kind of in a holding pattern until August 11th when we find out, kind of what Governor Kevin's going to do and kind of where we see the trends for COVID in terms of getting back together safely. So at this point, we're still in a holding pattern, and that leads me to my to our next speaker. Actually, it will be the day before that, so August 10th. We'll be having Stan Birdie, and Donnie Hickson will be talking about Stan's book, Against All Odds. And you'll see in the Kiwanis notes some bios to Stan and also a blurb about the book. And I hate that Simon had to jump off because I had a great little piece of humor to leave with him, and so I'll leave it with everybody else. How do you know when stocks are getting cheap? And we know that stocks are getting cheap when Wall Street changes its name to Walmart Street. That was pretty bad. Sorry. I'm glad you're all muted, so you can't give me that hard time. All right, guys. Well, listen, I'm going to leave it at that, and feel free to be sure you're sharing that we're having these meetings every other week with your our other Kiwanis members, so that we're all aware of what's going on. Okay, we appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing them. Appreciate it.
All right, bye guys. Thank you.
Bye.
You said holding pattern until when?
At least August 11th.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Jeff, are there any board meetings?
Yes,
scheduled?
we'll be sending out an email on that early this week.
And so we'll have a virtual meeting again in 2 weeks.
That's correct. August 10th, and we'll have
Okay.
Yep, Stan Birdie.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.